Making people laugh is a tough way to make a living, but these beloved comics rose to the occasion, and their tragic deaths left the world way less funny.
He's trying to do more than just make you laugh, and I think that that's what made him a great actor.
John Candy was a comedy star who played warm-hearted characters. He spent the 1970s and 80s acting in television, including on the iconic sketch series SCTV. In 1987, Candy had a breakout year, co-starring in Mel Brooks' Star Wars parody Spaceballs and the holiday classic Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with Steve Martin. Candy appeared in a number of classic family comedies, including Uncle Buck, The Great Outdoors, and The Blues Brothers.
Who wants an orange whip? Orange whip? Orange whip? 3 orange whips!
But on March 4, 1994, Candy, age 43, died of a heart attack. He just finished filming his penultimate movie, Wagons East. According to forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Hunter, career setbacks would drive Candy, who struggled with obesity throughout his life, to episodes of binge eating. Candy's smoking and cocaine use were also contributing factors to his death.
I hope everybody here to have a good time because I am here to have a blast.
On August 9, 2008, the world lost a comedy legend that was Bernie Mac. Mac had been diagnosed with the immune disorder sarcoidosis a few years before his death, but by 2005, it was believed that he'd gone into remission. In 2008, though, Mac died from complications related to pneumonia, unrelated to his sarcoidosis. Mac was only 50 years old. Tributes poured in from A-listers like George Clooney, who said, "The world just got a little less funny." In 2016, Mac's wife of 30 years, Rhonda McCullough, spoke to Oprah about his last moments, recalling, "My whole life was him since I was 16. I didn't know what I was going to do. It's like, what is my reasoning for being here now? How am I going to make it now?" McCullough has since found her purpose through her work with the Bernie Mac Foundation. She continues to raise money and keeps Mac's memory alive. When Jan Hooks stepped onto the Saturday Night Live stage in 1986, the Chicago Tribune called her and co-star Nora Dunn one of the best comedy duos the show had ever seen.
A little club soda will get that out.
Liar!
After leaving SNL, Hooks appeared on shows like Designing Women, Third Rock from the Sun, and 30 Rock. So when it was announced that she died on October 9, 2014, it seemed to be another loss that came out of nowhere. But a year after her death, an article in Grantland revealed what happened. In 2014, Hooks discovered a lump in her throat. It was cancer, and doctors told her it wouldn't respond to chemotherapy. The only option would have left Hooks permanently disfigured and unable to speak, so she ultimately decided against treatment. At her funeral, Hooks' brother Tom told the assembled mourners, "Most of us haven't heard from her in years, but maybe we can learn a lesson from that. If you're feeling bad or lonely, please reach out. There are a lot of people right here that love you."
I'm going to be found dead in bed.
3 months later, the 65-year-old actor was discovered dead in his bed at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando.
On January 9, 2022, Bob Saget, stand-up comedian and beloved father figure on the sitcom Full House, was found unresponsive in his hotel room. According to a statement from the Orange County Sheriff's Office, there was no evidence of a struggle, any type of foul play, or that anyone else was in the room at any time during his stay. Ultimately, the cause of death was ruled to be blunt force trauma as a result of a fall. In his obituary, the Los Angeles Times referred to Saget as America's dad.
See, Michelle? Joey's a boy and he can do ballet. And you and Aunt Becky are girls and you can build cars.
And in an interview with Today, shortly after his death, Saget's wife, Kelly Rizzo, explained his popularity and common touch, saying, "One way or another, he was in your living room since the 80s. He felt like he was everyone's dear friend. Nobody will ever be like Bob." The night before he was found dead, the 65-year-old Saget performed a 2-hour set. Rizzo explained that he'd returned to the road post-pandemic as a form of healing, sharing, "All the weight of everything going on in the world right now is just weighing very heavily on him, and that's why he felt more compelled than ever to make people laugh and bring people together, and he did it up until the very last moments." While comedians can be intimidating human beings, that wasn't Louie Anderson. A New York Times review for his 1987 comedy special read, "At a time when stand-up comedy is trafficking heavily in insult, hysteria, and sexual obsessions, Mr. Anderson seems to have come up with something truly different, old-fashioned, heartwarming humor." Anderson got his big break on The Tonight Show, receiving unusually high praise from host Johnny Carson.
There's a funny young kid. Louie, come out here and take another bow.
And his career built from there. From stand-up to the animated Life with Louie series that every child, old or young, could relate to Baskets with Zach Galifianakis, Anderson never resorted to cheap shots in his comedy. In a 1996 interview with the Orlando Sentinel, Anderson explained, "There's nothing hateful about my comedy. I look at it from the humanity standpoint. I'm just kind of like, hey, we're all in this together."
You're suing me.
Yeah, Mother. I'm suing the person that I came out of.
Anderson was hospitalized for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma on January 18, 2022, and died 3 days later of complications from cancer. He was 68 years old. When Patrice O'Neal took the stage, he dominated. Known for being the guy that wasn't pulling any punches, the New York Times called him the comedian with a career that other comedians aspired to, going from stand-up to having shows on Comedy Central and HBO. It was more than impressive, considering that O'Neal often dealt with controversial topics and didn't care who he offended. If it was the truth, he was going to say it. O'Neal wasn't just known for alienating audiences, he put himself in the spotlight too. Weighing in at somewhere around 300 pounds, he often spoke about his diabetes and struggles with weight, saying, "See, I've got to lose weight now to stay alive, and that's not enough motivation for me."
Wait a minute, here is, wait. All right, here's my I'm not fat stand right here.
The 41-year-old comic suffered a stroke on October 19, 2011. He died of complications on November 29th. Andy Kaufman was one of a kind. His stand-up career led him to television, where he was a regular on Taxi and logged 14 appearances on Saturday Night Live, until audiences phoned in overwhelming numbers to ask that he never be allowed back.
Sorry, Andy, you'll never be on Saturday Night Live again!
Kaufman, who was a non-smoker, died of lung cancer when he was just 35 years old, but his death would end up being as strange as his life. His brother insisted Kaufman faked his death, and the rumor was fueled by comments Kaufman himself had made about the possibility. However, Kaufman's manager George Shapiro confirmed, "Andy's very much alive in our hearts, but I don't think his body is around. He died. I was in the hospital." Given that the Los Angeles County coroner went so far as to re-release his death certificates, it's safe to say that Kaufman's death wasn't the hoax some wanted it to be. John Ritter first hit it big on Three's Company and was still going strong decades later as the dad in 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. So when Ritter died on September 11, 2003, it seemed to come out of nowhere. Earlier that day, he'd been on set with Henry Winkler, who recalled, "We worked out a bit in a scene and we laughed. I thought, this is going to be great." Later, Ritter was taken to a nearby hospital with nausea. He thought he had food poisoning, but just a few hours later, he was dead. It was his daughter's 5th birthday. Ritter was just 54 years old. The official cause of death was aortic dissection.
You know what it is? It seems like a big mistake.
Ritter's widow, actor Amy Yazbek, continues to champion the John Ritter Foundation and speaks about the dangers of this largely invisible but deadly condition. She explained, "I share his world with others, and that allows me to never run out of him."
I've seen a lot of monologues, and believe you me, the monologue can destroy a man.
Few celebrity deaths have been as tragic or as shocking as the May 28, 1998 murder-suicide that took the life of Saturday Night Live star Phil Hartman. Hartman was a graphic designer who found his purpose when he volunteered to join the Groundlings on stage mid-performance. Less well-known than his tenure on SNL was the fact that he co-created Pee Wee Herman with Paul Reubens. By the time of his death, Hartman had become an award-winning actor and writer, lauded for his versatility. Hartman married his third wife, Bryn Omdahl, in 1987. They had 2 children together, but friends recounted how the relationship became strained by his success and her struggles with drugs, addiction, and anger.
He had mentioned to Bryn that, maybe I can get you a part. And when he'd come home, he'd say, "Oh, I forgot."
By the time law enforcement responded to the sound of gunshots coming from the Hartman home in Encino, California, Hartman was already dead. A friend would later testify that after shooting and killing Hartman around 2 a.m., Bryn first fled to the home of a friend, Ron Douglas, where she confessed the killing. They then returned to the scene where Douglas called 911. While law enforcement moved the children to a safe location, Bryn Hartman took her own life.
I'm from an average type family, 11 kids. No mother and father, just kids.
On December 10, 2005, Richard Pryor died of a massive heart attack at a San Fernando Valley home. He was 65 years old. It wasn't his first brush with death, it was just the one he lost. Nothing about Pryor's life was easy. In addition to confronting the racial inequality that he spoke about on stage, he battled drug and alcohol addiction for years, once infamously setting himself on fire and burning about 50% of his body while using cocaine.
I woke up in an ambulance, right? And it wasn't nothing but white people staring at me.
By the time he tried to make a comeback in the 90s, the burns had healed, but he was suffering with multiple sclerosis that made even the basics of daily life a struggle. Pryor helped change the way comedy portrayed law enforcement. Before him, cops were often depicted as slapstick stumblebums, but Pryor talked about the police from a uniquely personal point of view.
I am reaching into my pocket for my license.
After that album came out, law enforcement personnel told Pryor that when they pulled people over, those are the words they repeated. The year was 1974. After Pryor's death, there were scores of tributes, but perhaps none summed up his work better than Quincy Jones, who said, "The legacy that he leaves will forever be with us." John Belushi is one of the most famous comics to come out of Saturday Night Live. For a while, it looked like he was going to be able to turn small-screen success into big-screen stardom, but it wasn't in the cards. In 2012, Dan Aykroyd looked back on the making of the Blues Brothers and told Vanity Fair, "We had a budget in the movie for cocaine for night shoots. Everyone did it, including me. But John, he just loved what it did." Unfortunately, drug abuse would contribute to his death on March 5, 1982. Belushi had checked into the Chateau Marmont, Hollywood's Sunset Strip, just a few days prior on February 28th. He was struggling, hopping from party to party and then heading back to his bungalow with whoever wanted to keep the party going. It wasn't long after both Robert De Niro and Robin Williams stopped by then left that Belushi and one of his dealers, Kathy Smith, shot up a mix of cocaine and heroin. Belushi's trainer got there the next day and found his body. The official cause of death was acute cocaine and heroin intoxication. Belushi was just 33 years old. His legacy was long-lasting, and in 2010, Aykroyd told the AP, "I miss him every day." Some people can act, some can sing, and some are just naturally funny, but it's a rare few who have it all, and one of those people was Madeline Kahn.
Oh, a red rose. How romantic.
A Tony Award-winning actor, Kahn was most famous for the work she did in Mel Brooks' classics like High Anxiety, Young Frankenstein, and Blazing Saddles. When CBS News asked about her, Brooks said, "She is one of the most talented people that ever lived." Kahn died on December 3, 1999, about a month after she publicly announced that she'd been diagnosed with ovarian cancer. After going public with her diagnosis, Kahn said that she hoped her own struggles would serve the greater good, sharing, "It is my hope that I might raise awareness of this awful disease and hasten the day that an effective test can be discovered to give women a fighting chance to catch this cancer in its earliest stage."
Flash by name, Flash by nature.
The tragic death of Rik Mayall, the British comedian best known for his roles in The Young Ones, Bottom, and Blackadder, is a reminder of how fragile life is. On June 9, 2014, Mayall's wife of 29 years, Barbara Robbins, found him collapsed in their home. A friend who saw him about 30 minutes before his collapse said he, quote, "seemed so happy and so healthy." 16 years earlier, Mayall had a near-fatal quad bike accident that left him in a coma for 5 days. He recovered only to be diagnosed with epilepsy. It wasn't clear if the previous accident had anything to do with Mayall's sudden death, which was caused by a heart attack. In response to the outpouring of grief and support, Robbins said, "I'm sure that you all know Rik's response would be something along the lines of, 'Well, thanks very much, all of you. Now f*** off.'" Norm Macdonald may have started out as a writer for Roseanne Barr, but it was his deadpan delivery on Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update that made him famous, particularly when the acquittal of O.J. Simpson elicited an infamous comment.
Well, it is finally official. Murder is legal in the state of California.
Macdonald was fired shortly after.
He goes, "Oh, you're not funny."
Yeah.
And then I said, "Holy Lord, that's even worse news, you know?"
Macdonald went on to star in his own show. Conan O'Brien called him one of his favorite guests, and all that was just a drop in the bucket when compared to the volume of stand-up he did. Macdonald's death on September 14, 2021 seemed to come out of left field, but he'd actually been diagnosed with cancer 9 years earlier. Macdonald had insisted on keeping his diagnosis private. He didn't even tell many among his family and friends. According to a longtime friend, he didn't want his health to change how people saw his comedy. Macdonald summed up his outlook on life in his 2016 book based on a true story. Writing about being fired from SNL, he said, "They assume you must be bitter, but it is impossible for me to be bitter. I've been lucky."
Garry told an audience, "Don't worry, folks, you're going to feel good by comparison when I leave the stage."
Garry Shandling, who starred in HBO's first original series, The Larry Sanders Show, knew something was wrong on March 23, 2016. He told a friend he had a strange pain in his leg and was having difficulty breathing. Shandling said he'd go to the doctor the following day. He never made it. The media reported that opiates were found in his system, and while that's true, it was only part of the story. The 66-year-old Shandling had been prescribed opiates and Xanax after some dental work, but the levels in his bloodstream were low. Shandling's official cause of death was deep vein thrombosis. A blood clot had formed in one of his legs, likely during a recent trip to Hawaii. The clot had broken free and lodged in his lung, causing his sudden death. Shandling had mostly withdrawn from the public eye after the end of The Larry Sanders Show, but the entertainment world hadn't forgotten him. Speaking with The Independent, Seth MacFarlane called The Larry Sanders Show the greatest single-camera comedy of all time. Ralphie May had become a stand-up staple, riding high after a pair of Netflix specials when he died at the age of 45. May got his big break at just 17 when he opened for Sam Kinison. One of May's topics was his weight, but when he talked to the Bent Weekly source, he commented, "I don't make my weight my central focus. I'll certainly address it if the situation applies, but I certainly don't make it the focus of my stand-up comedy. My audience has accepted me for a long time as, not a fat comedian, but a comedian who happens to be fat. That's a huge difference." May died on October 6, 2017, but the Clark County coroner didn't release their official findings until December. In the months before his death, May was forced to cancel several shows due to persistent bouts of pneumonia. But according to their reports, the official cause of death was hypertensive cardiovascular disease.
Statistically speaking, he went way beyond anything that anyone had done up until that time.
Lenny Bruce became a counterculture icon in the late 50s and 60s with his controversial comedic style and subsequent arrests on obscenity charges, most famously after a 1964 show in New York. As a comedian, Bruce combined social criticism and an edgy style with a colorful vocabulary and improvised way of riffing that resembled that of a jazz musician. Bruce is ranked the third greatest comedian of all time by Rolling Stone, behind only George Carlin and Richard Pryor.
But you might be interested in how I became offensive.
But his breakneck style eventually led to his downfall. In 1961, he was arrested in San Francisco for obscenity following his act. For the rest of his career, authorities dogged Bruce, making it harder and harder for him to earn a living and piling on stress, which in turn fueled his drug addiction. On March 31st and April 1st, 1964, Bruce performed at the Cafe El Go-Go in New York, after which he was arrested and eventually convicted of violating obscenity laws in a highly publicized case.
I don't think he ever understood why it was upsetting people. That's just how he talked.
37 years later, Bruce's conviction would be overturned, but sadly, it was far too late. On August 3, 1966, Bruce died of a morphine overdose in Hollywood Hills, California. During Chris Farley's time on Saturday Night Live, he was in many ways the spiritual successor to John Belushi. Both comedians were robust men who could steal a sketch with boundless energy, and unfortunately, Farley also carried some of the same demons that ultimately ended both of their lives. He joined SNL in 1990, and during his 5-year tenure, he became one of the show's most celebrated actors. His most memorable sketches included the likes of the Chippendales audition and Matt Foley motivational speaker. Following his time on the show, he starred with his good buddy David Spade in the films Tommy Boy and Black Sheep. While Farley's career was on the rise, his personal life was spiraling from drug and alcohol addiction. He returned to SNL to host an episode in October 1997. He reportedly lost his voice during a dress rehearsal and was breathless throughout the live show. Less than 2 months after that episode aired, he died of a cocaine and morphine overdose at the age of 33, the same age and the same combination of drugs that had killed Belushi back in 1982.
He was the best. We all loved that boy.
As one of the original cast members on Saturday Night Live, Gilda Radner is one of the most important figures in 20th century comedy. Her influence can be seen in popular TV characters that followed in her wake, like Seinfeld's Elaine Bennis and 30 Rock's Liz Lemon. After leaving SNL, Radner appeared in a few movies in the 80s, often alongside Gene Wilder, whom she married in 1984 after the two met on the set of 1982's Hanky Panky. In 1986, Radner started to suffer from various physical ailments such as cramping, bleeding, and weight loss. During this time, she and Wilder were attempting to have a child. After visits to multiple doctors and a series of misdiagnoses, she eventually learned that she had ovarian cancer. Wilder later recalled that after the cancer was finally discovered, she turned to him and said, "Thank God, someone believes me." Alas, that sense of relief wasn't enough to help Radner recover from the disease, as she died in 1989 at the age of 42, though her legacy lives on in many ways. As the radical activism of the 1960s led into the 70s, Flip Wilson's variety program, The Flip Wilson Show, illustrated how far America had come in terms of race relations. While Wilson himself wasn't the first African American to host his own TV show, he was popular enough that it led Time magazine to refer to him as TV's first black superstar. He understood his role as a popular black comedian palatable for a white audience, as he once said, "A show hosted by a black had never been accepted. I may have been the first black in the house for some white viewers." In this way, Wilson steered clear of the political turbulence of his time to get a foot in the door for future black comedians to be free to discuss anything they wanted. By the 80s, he'd left show business to focus on his family, though he would also struggle with drug addiction during this period. In 1985, he returned to TV to play the dad in the CBS show Charlie and Company, which ran for only one season. Wilson would ultimately succumb to liver cancer in 1998 at the age of 64. Bill Hicks left behind a massive comedic legacy despite living a rather short life. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in June 1993 and died the following February at the age of 32. He achieved cult status while he was alive and has since become more well-known and celebrated following his passing. In the late 80s, he grew his audience through relentless touring. He worked in the Houston-based Comedy Workshop while a member of the Texas Outlaw Comics. He drew attention for tackling taboo subjects such as the First Amendment, religion, and substance abuse. These subjects limited Hicks' commercial viability in the United States outside of his cult following, though he did experience some success overseas. But he didn't get to enjoy that for very long, as he passed away 8 months after his cancer diagnosis. One of his last appearances was on The Late Show with David Letterman, which became infamous after Letterman cut the entire set to avoid controversy, which enraged Hicks. In 2009, Letterman invited Hicks's mother Mary onto the show to apologize and then play Bill's entire performance. In a 2001 interview with Penthouse, Mitch Hedberg was asked how he would end his life, to which he responded, "First, I'd want to get famous, and then I'd overdose. If I overdosed at this stage of my career, I would be lucky if it made the back pages." Hedberg's comedy style was a bit of a throwback as it relied primarily on clever puns and quick wit. Entertainment Weekly once referred to him as comedy's Kurt Cobain. Much like that rock star, Hedberg seemed very uncomfortable with his popularity, as he frequently mumbled his lines and kept his head down and voice low. Also like Cobain, Hedberg was heavily addicted to drugs, an issue he fought throughout his life. Hedberg developed a passionate cult following that would shout out his punchlines before he could even finish his setups. Unfortunately, despite all that love, he was unable to overcome a dependency on drugs. On March 30th, 2005, he was found dead in his hotel room from a heroin and cocaine overdose. Just 13 days prior, he had appeared on the Howard Stern show and said that his drug problem was under control. He was only 37 years old. Sam Kinison began the 80s as a former fire and brimstone Pentecostal preacher trying to make it as a comedian. He ended the decade as one of the era's most successful stand-ups, beloved for a routine that would have gotten him kicked out of every church in the nation. He was known and beloved for his iconic scream and explicit rants about various subjects. In the early 80s, he refined his act as part of the Texas Outlaw Comics, alongside the likes of Bill Hicks, among others. Hicks once said of Kinison, "What I learned from Sam was this. He was the first guy I ever saw to go on stage and not in any way ask the audience to like him. That gave me confidence because I knew you could just be yourself." On April 5, 1992, Kinison married his girlfriend Malika. 5 days later, he was traveling to Nevada for a show when he was struck head-on by a pickup truck. As he lay dying, he carried on a conversation with seemingly no one. He pleaded that he didn't want to die, asked no one in particular why he had to pass away, and then seemingly accepted an answer, as he said, okay. He was only 38. Freddie Prinze achieved fame at a young age, but he wouldn't be able to enjoy it for very long, as he died at the age of 22. Nevertheless, he left behind a significant legacy as a star of the NBC sitcom Chico and the Man, and also thanks to his stand-up and appearances on celebrity roasts. In 1979, CBS aired a movie about Prince's life called Can You Hear the Laughter?, the story of Freddie Prinze. Peter Greenberg, the movie's producer, said of Prince, "He never got a chance to think. He was moving too fast." By the age of 16, Prince was already using cocaine and taking Quaaludes. His big break came in 1973 when he delivered an acclaimed stand-up performance on The Tonight Show, which led to his starring role on Chico and the Man. By 1977, Prince had become depressed and dependent on drugs. His marriage was crumbling, and he worried about being separated from his son. On January 28th of that year, he shot himself in the head and then died the next day. It was originally determined that he killed himself, but his family launched a civil case, which led to his death being declared accidental because of his hobby of playing Russian roulette.
In the years to come, and in the days and the years, this moment will have passed, and we'll see Freddie again.
Robin Williams became a huge star by playing such hilarious characters as the alien Mork on Mork and Mindy and the genie in Aladdin. He also had a penchant for more serious performances in films like Dead Poets Society and Good Will Hunting. And he was, of course, beloved for his comedy specials that featured him tirelessly breaking into an array of various characters like a comedic Swiss Army knife. But he also struggled throughout his career with depression and drug and alcohol addiction. He was able to kick his cocaine habit following the death of his friend John Belushi, who had been with Williams the night before his fatal overdose. Alas, the alcohol and the depression both remained present for the rest of his life. On August 11, 2014, Williams took his own life at the age of 63. Just months before, he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. Sherry Minns, his makeup artist on Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb, one of his final films, told Vanity Fair that he had sobbed in her arms at the end of every day. Other people close to him said that he was losing weight and that it was becoming harder and harder to hide the effects of his condition. After his death on autopsy, it was discovered that he had Lewy body dementia, an incurable brain disorder associated with an increased risk of self-inflicted death. In 2018, his son Zach recalled what his father was like in an HBO documentary about the comedian.
In so many senses, he is the most successful person I know. And yet he didn't always feel that.